Farzy, I'm upset today, man.
What? About
I'm
what?
upset.
How so?
I don't know how you aren't either. Can you believe Prince William is the sexiest bald guy in the world? Look at us two. Are you kidding?
Okay, it did
I'm upset.
sting just a little bit because you and I have been doing the two bald guys since way before Prince what's his face. And
Yeah.
let me just add, you're looking fine today, my
Oh,
friend.
thank
Just
well,
fine.
and I don't know if you and him are actually bald. You guys are still holding on to the dream. My dream is long gone. So I
Okay,
don't know.
since you brought it up, can I just admit to how much I hate the current look I have right now, which does look like I'm still holding on. I remember a picture that my beloved snapped of me when we were away in London years ago, and it was from behind on some street, and I wasn't wearing my ball cap, and I'm like, listen, I'm past the point of my life of caring, but what I didn't like is that it made it look like I was that guy that was still trying to. I'm
Oh,
not. You know what the honest to God truth is, and it pains me to say it. I'm lazy. I'm lazy. So I buzz it with the Clippers once a week. And this is actually what you're seeing if you're watching us on YouTube is 8 days. But I should do it more often. I should just because I have given up. I just am too lazy to really show that I've given up.
I'm thinking laser treatment. Just do because I bick it, and I got like the Hulk Hogan going. Like it's pretty far back down the back of the head.
Yeah.
Like, my hair is running down my back, running away from my face, and I don't blame it. So I'm thinking I might just do the laser therapy, get rid of it, save my money on Bic.
I want to. How do you bick that? You just bick it blind?
Yeah,
Yeah. See,
all the
that's probably
time.
what people do.
Gillette.
I should do it. I should do it. I
It's
don't do
it's
it.
so worth it.
I
Anyway, that's the level of conversation we have on OHL stories right now because there's no stories around the OHL.
Yeah. See, I was going to say, I thought maybe you were going to be upset because, there's no news from the league to talk about, but why should we be more upset this week than we were last week or the week before or the week before or the week before that? So,
Yeah, exactly. I'm not
yeah.
upset. Hey, quick stick tap to Logan Stanley getting his first NHL goal. That's it. Do you want me to intro our guest this week and we can just get out of here?
Yes, because our guest is going to make reference. I was just going to quickly ask, and I think I know the answer, but the biggest goal in Logan Stanley's career so far. He's always going to remember that first NHL goal. Does it compare to Game 7 with 53 seconds to go in Sault Ste. Marie 2017, putting the Rangers and the Greyhounds into overtime, double overtime? And our guest on this podcast will remember where he was during that playoff series.
It was a pretty cool goal. Our guest this week, let's do the intro. He doesn't need one. Bob McKenzie.
Bob, I think of you obviously as a guy that needs absolutely no introduction, and maybe a little bit, if I can put it this way, like the Wayne Gretzky of the Ontario Hockey League, just because Wayne Gretzky had that one magical year in the Sioux. People kind of forget that he had been with Peterborough for 3 games prior to that. And you, so well regarded and so influential in the game of hockey, maybe many forget that it all started for you at the Sault Star back in 1979. And I don't think you had even graduated from Ryerson yet. How did that first job come to pass?
Yeah, you know what? I got a summer job at the Sault Star, the summer of 1978. I should back it up a little bit. So my future brother-in-law, at the time it was my girlfriend's brother, but my wife became my wife, Cindy, John Goodwin. He played for the Wexford Midgets, and they won they were back in the old Air Canada Cup, and now it's the TELUS, whatever, the National Midget Championship. He was playing for Wexford, and they won the Ontario. They got to compete in the Ontario aspect of that, and it was in Sault Ste. Marie right after Christmas. So I went up with them on a bus to Sault Ste. Marie, and when I was there, I got to meet the sports editor of the Sault Star and somebody else, and I kind of put my name in the hat for a summer job, and so I was fortunate enough at the end of my second year of Ryerson to get a summer job at the Sault Star in the news department, not sports. And as fate would have it, that April or May, the OHL draft, my future brother-in-law, John Goodwin, got drafted in the 5th round by the Sault Greyhounds. And so then at the end of the summer, I went back to Ryerson for my 3rd year. He came up to the Sault and made the Sault Greyhounds, not only made the Sault Greyhounds, but was Rookie of the Year in the Ontario Hockey League. He beat Don Beaupre. That was the year the the Greyhounds drafted Paul Coffey in the first round. He was the same age as my brother-in-law. And of course, Coffey went on to become a Kitchener Ranger. And by the time I was back covering the Greyhounds the next season, I was writing the story about Coffey being traded to the Kitchener Rangers from the Sioux Greyhounds. So that was basically, I got the summer job. And from there, the Sault Star said, we'll hire you full-time when you graduate if we have a spot open. And I've told this story many times before. They said, but if somebody leaves between September and December, we've got to fill the job right away. But if somebody leaves between January and April and you're graduating in April, we'll hold off and wait for you to graduate. And so as it turned out, somebody left the Sault Star, and it was in the sports departments, which was even better because I hated the thought of being a news reporter. All I wanted to do was write hockey. And the guy that left the Sault Star, his name was Rob Stone. He went to Winnipeg, and I don't know whatever became of him, but I know he had a couple of kids, and their names Mark Stone and Michael Stone. And so my slow pitch buddy from the summer of '78, Stoney, decided to go to Winnipeg with his family, his wife, and have kids out there. And of course, they went on to both be NHLers. And I got my job at the Sault Star full time that summer of April of '79, and got to cover the Greyhounds for a couple of seasons.
What was it like going to those games and covering your future brother-in-law?
Yeah, you know what? It was interesting, obviously, huge conflict of interest, but I mean, what are you going to do? I mean, not cover the team, not take the job. It did make for interesting times because that first season, of that first full-time year of covering the Sioux Greyhounds for me, Terry Crisp was the new coach, and they didn't do very well. And at the end of the year, I wrote a column basically, and when I started out in the business, I was pretty full of myself, and I was a bit of a muckraker. I wanted to stir things up or whatever. So I basically wrote a column at the end of that season, basically saying Terry Crisp did a terrible job with the team. And it wasn't easy to do because my brother-in-law is on the team. So it looks like this is all coming from my brother-in-law, which it wasn't. But nevertheless, I just said, well, too bad if people think that. This is what I thought. I'm a columnist and I get paid for my opinion. And Crispy, who I'm pals with now still, he went ballistic. And he wanted me banned from the dressing room. So Sam McMaster was the general manager of the Sioux Greyhounds at the time. And Sam was a pretty creative guy. So we told Terry Crisp, okay, I'll ban him from the dressing room. Sam did not want to ban a Sault Star reporter from the dressing room, knowing the kind of blowback you'd get on something like that, not just in the Sioux, but league-wide would be a big deal. So he printed up a letter that said Bob McKenzie's not allowed to be in the dressing room, but he posted it on the back of the dressing room door. So that when I go to walk through the door, there's nothing on the door is open, and I go in. And Jay O'Connor was an overage goalie, and it was late in the season, as I said, when I wrote this column. And Jay O'Connor, the overage goalie, said, "What are you doing in here?" And I said, "Oh, nothing, just working." And he goes, "No, you're banned from the room." And I said, "No, I'm not." And he goes, "Yeah, you are." And he goes over and he opens the door and he shows me the letter, and I'm like, "Oh, wow." And so next time I saw Sam, I go, "Sam, I saw that letter on the back of the door. Am I banned from the dressing room?" And he goes, "Yeah." I go, "You never told me." And he goes, "Yeah." And I go, "What's the point of banning me from the dressing room if I don't know that I'm banned from the dressing room and you're not enforcing the ban?" And he goes, "Well, I knew Crispy would get over it sooner or later, but in the meantime, when he's in the dressing room talking to the players, he would see the letter on the door and know that I was banned from the dressing room. But it didn't stop you from going in and doing your job. So I thought it worked for everybody."
Any chance that Crispy wrote you a letter about 5 years later when his Greyhounds went perfect on home ice?
No, I don't think so. But I see Crispy when the Bobby Orr golf tournament was still happening in Parry Sound before COVID. Crispy was always there. It's his hometown, Parry Sound, of course, and we used to joke about a lot of stuff. So now I get it was all fun and games. That was Crispy's first year. His first year as a coach, really. Outside, he did some assistant coaching in the NHL with Philly, but his first year as a head coach was in Sault Ste. Marie, and I was there. So good times.
Walking into that role, your first role, your brother or your future brother-in-law is on the team, and Terry Crisp is a pretty intimidating guy, and then he bans you from the dressing room. Did you ever get discouraged moving forward?
No, not really. What I realized early on is there's a line I use sometimes. Somebody's always mad. Somebody's always mad at you in our business. And so you just kind of take it as a fact of life and go on from there. But yeah, usually if you're doing your job, somebody's not too happy with you.
Any more run-ins with Crispy?
No, that was the only really big one. So yeah, we now I wasn't around for a ton of time after that, because for the 81-82 season, I went back to Toronto and back to home in Scarborough and worked part-time at the Globe and Mail and did some freelance for the Hockey News. And then in June of 82, became editor-in-chief of the Hockey News. But yeah, that was an interesting season for sure. So there was two full seasons with Crispy. His first year and his second year. And in the second year, the Greyhounds were a juggernaut. And of course, they were derailed by the Orville Tessier-led Brian Bellows, Al McInnes, Wendell Young, Kitchener Rangers. The Greyhounds were the top team in the regular season, but came up short in the playoffs in the OHL Championship against the Rangers. So it's funny to look back on it now and see sort of the connection between Kitchener and the Sioux, and with my son Mike there now and what have you. But yeah, it's crazy.
Oh my gosh. On that note then, as I jump way ahead in the timeline here, but how about just a few seasons ago, Game 7 Western Conference Final, and your son's team loses in double overtime. What's that impact? You must have been on pins and needles following. Sure.
I watched the entire, I never sat down for the entire overtimes. I was pacing around in our house in Brooklyn. And so many chances that they missed on. And then for the one that went in, it was a bit of a deflection. And boy, it was a tough one to take, because it would have been great to go to the OHL final and see what they would have done against Hamilton.
Your approach, Bob, in those early days as a beat reporter or a sports reporter, a general sports reporter, it would have been with the Sault Star. So you've got to cover everything in Sault Ste. Marie, not just hockey, but you wanted to write hockey. You made that your focus. How did you cultivate and develop your chops, as we say, as a hockey writer at that time?
Well, you're right. The Sault Star, they want you to go cover the fastball game. They want you to go do the stock car races. They want you to go down and do the club championship at the golf course. And you got to do all that stuff. But I figured if I kept on coming up with story ideas that were hockey related, that, they might not be as interested in the discretionary other things that sometimes get covered, sometimes don't get covered. So I just tried to turn the hockey into a full-time beat, which I more or less did when I was there. And so you just keep on supplying really good, as much information as you could on the Greyhounds. And that's the biggest show in town, no doubt. And the fans, but you still end up at the stock car races on Sunday night or whatever.
Did you have a favorite driver?
No, I don't even remember. It was just like, that was anything other than hockey, that was work. Yeah. When it was hockey, when it was going to the rink, it wasn't work.
You're up in the Sioux, and they got a couple guys up front on that team. Rick Tocchet, a guy like Ron Francis. What was it like watching those guys mature and then covering them again in the National League?
Yeah, Tocchet came in after I was gone, but you're right. I mean, the first full-time year that I was there, that was Ronnie Francis's first year. John Van Beesbrook was the goalie. So yeah, Ronnie was exactly the way he is now, very studious. He was the kid on the bus doing his homework all the time, very scholastic, really good player. But it was great. I mean, to have that experience and to cover junior hockey, the players that go to junior hockey, they want to make it to the National Hockey League. So did I. And so covering junior hockey the way I covered it and the way the kids approach playing it, Probably not that much different. My goal was to go into the National Hockey League and be a hockey writer, be a beat reporter to cover an NHL team. And so I was doing everything I possibly could in the Sioux to try and realize that dream, same as the players were doing the same thing. But it was great seeing all the players for, go to the Memorial Cup that year that Kitchener went to, and Dale Howardchuk and Dougie Gilmore and the Cornwall Royals were there. And so just I love junior hockey. It was fantastic to be able to see all these future NHL stars at that age, and to get to know them, and to be around the rinks, and to get to know the NHL scouts, and who've gone on to become NHL general managers and team presidents. And I just had a great affection for junior hockey then. It's carried right through.
You had the chance, Bob. You continued to cover junior hockey and the Canadian Hockey League. And in '93, when the Greyhounds finally broke through after 3 straight appearances in the championship and they won it, you were there to cover that Memorial Cup. What was it like then, some 15 years after you had been there as that beat reporter with the Sault Star, coming back to watch them achieve the ultimate goal?
I could start it with, that Pizzaville commercial. It was a rainy night. It was a very, when I remember it's funny how you remember these things. It was a very rainy night in Sault Ste. Marie. And the reason I remember that is because after they won it, they were having their own impromptu post-game celebration right down Queen Street in Sault Ste. Marie. And I always remember the Zamboni driving down Queen Street out of the old Sioux Memorial Gardens, right down the main street. And it was pouring rain at the time. But that was phenomenal. And it was heartbreaking when they lost in Seattle on the Zach Boyer goal. I did that Memorial Cup as well. I was really fortunate that even though I left junior hockey technically after those years, my first couple of years in the Sioux, I still had a really strong connection with it, because in 1990, I started doing the CHL Game of the Week with Paul Romanuk and on TSN, and got to do those Memorial Cups for all those years. And I also got to do the World Junior Championships. Well, I actually did that with the CBC. The last year the CBC had World Junior rights, 1990, I was part of a broadcast team that included Don Whitman, Scotty Bowman, and Brian Williams in Helsinki. But then TSN got the World Juniors in 91, and I've basically done it every year since then. For the most part, it was, I think, 1 year that I didn't. But so even though I was covering the National Hockey League as part of my job as editor-in-chief of the Hockey News, Toronto Star hockey columnist, or TSN Hockey Insider, I've always had these really strong connections to junior hockey, be it the World Juniors or back in the day, the CHL package.
Sorry, I think we just breezed over a broadcast team that included Scotty Bowman and Brian McFarland. Is that who you said, or Brian Williams? I can't remember.
Right. Brian Williams was
Brian
the host.
Williams, yeah.
Don Whitman was the play-by-play guy. Scotty was the color guy, and I was sort of the between periods filler guy.
What was that like, listening to those guys?
Oh, it was awesome. It was fantastic. So that was Eric Lindros' 16-year-old season when Canada won gold. Dick Todd and Guy Charon were on the bench. That was a crazy World Juniors, because I've told this story many times before. Canada was supposed to lose. They weren't going to win the gold medal. The Russians were in the driver's seat. All the Russians had to do with their final round robin game in Helsinki was beat a Swedish team that was like 6th or 7th place that year. And lo and behold, the Russians allowed the Swedes to tie the game up with a buzzer beater right at 1959. The Russians complained that it happened after the expiry of time, but the goal counted, and the Russia-Sweden game ended in a tie. There was about 3 minutes left in the Canada-Czech game in Turku, and I was right at ice level, right beside the Canadian bench. And to give you some idea of how times have changed, we didn't have, there was no internet back then, and if there was, nobody there was using it. And I, in my IFB in my ear, the truck told me, "You won't believe what just happened. Russia and Sweden just tied. If Canada holds on to win this game, they win the gold medal." So now Dick Todd, and the reason I say Dick Todd first, he was closest to me. Guy Charon was the head coach of the team. They're on the bench. They have no idea. Nobody's telling them this or whatever. They're just assuming that that's the case. And so I didn't want to say anything with the players right there, but it was an open air. It was a funny little rink, but I was just standing like right beside the bench, right at the boards. And there was a break, and I looked at Dick, and I got his attention, and I said, come here a second. And I said, I don't know if you want the players to know this, but you should tell Guy that Russia and Sweden just tied. If you hold on to win this game, you're going to win the gold medal. And so the play started up again. He goes, okay, thanks. And he went over to Guy, and he's whispering, and Guy looks over at me like, really? And I'm nodding, and he goes, okay. And so the next whistle, he gathered the guys in and told them what was going on, and the entire bench erupted. And now they had to hold this lead for another 2 minutes or whatever, which they did. That was the goal that they were already up on a goal by Dwayne Norris, very good Newfoundlander whose son Josh now plays for the Ottawa Senators. So anyways, they won the gold medal, but that was my 1990 World Junior story.
Crazy.
Would you have sold out the source in the truck who gave you that info, like unlike you've protected every other source you've ever had? Because the NHL was pretty mad at you when that central scouting list got published in the Hockey News.
No, yeah, that one. I don't even know who in the truck told me. The producer probably, but it was, it was just passed along, and that was information, public information at that time. But you're right, nobody like the NHL Central Scouting List, the NHL tried to keep that stuff top secret. And when I got to the Sault Star, I wanted to be like John Herbert of the London Free Press. He was a great junior hockey writer, and Herbie was the standard to which we all aspired to be. He was the guy that I wanted to be. And John Herbert always used to get the Central Scouting List, and they'd publish it in the London Free Press. And so when I went to the Sault Star, said, if I'm going to be a big deal here, I gotta beat Herbie and get the NHL Central Scouting List. And so one year, I think I did, and I was like all pleased with myself. But Herbie, of course, was a great guy. He gave Wayne Gretzky the nickname the Great Gretzky. Another great John Herbert story. I think it's actually true. I think he was assigned by the London Free Press on a Monday night to go cover the St. Thomas Junior B game, and he wasn't very happy about it because he covered the Knights. And it was a Monday night or whatever. So I think it was probably St. Thomas and St. Mary's playing. And so the lead of the story goes that the lead of his story was, the St. Thomas Stars defeated the St. Mary's Lincolns 5-4 last night before. And that's where you would normally put in the attendance, like 123 people or 16,757 in terms of your standard lead when you're writing for a newspaper. And what he did instead, there were only 11 or 12 people at the game. He went around and got all their names. And so the lead of the story said, St. Thomas Tommies or Stars or whatever they were called at the time defeated the St. Mary's Lincolns 4-3 before, and then he put all 11 names in the lead. So, but the London Free Press was a great newspaper, still is, but it was a great newspaper for covering junior hockey. And John Herbert led the way, and then Morris Delacosta ended up there, and Jim Cressman, and I could go on and on with all the great junior hockey reporters that I've worked with, against, and what have you in the old days.
I was always told 21 words for a lead, but I think that lead is okay to break the rule because that's just funny. You mentioned that Central Scouting List. Are you able to tell us who gave it to you now?
No, because they still might be giving me stuff. So
there you go.
You always protect the source.
Oh, I like that. Then I won't tell you who told me to ask you this, but do you still have a old blue and yellow coat that you used to wear out on the ice while coaching back in the day that you never took off? Apparently,
it's not as well. There's a blue and yellow one, but I think the coat to which you refer.
Oh, blue and orange.
Blue and orange. It looks like a New York Islander or Edmonton Oiler. It's a starter jacket actually. And it's beautiful. I wish you could see it.
So do I.
Now, I have two children who shall remain nameless, who think it's the ugliest thing that they've ever seen, but it is glorious. And what it was the media gift from the 1993 Stanley Cup final. And back in the days when you covered the Stanley Cup final, the NHL would give you a gift, and it usually was something pretty half decent, like a nice hoodie or in this case, it was this this lovely starter jacket, but it is very bright blue, bright orange, and white. It's got a beautiful Stanley Cup crest on it. And it was celebrating the 100th. I think the Stanley Cup goes back to 1893, and I think 1993 was the 100th anniversary of the Stanley Cup. And so, yes, I would wear that on the ice when I was coaching during practice. And I now use it. I only use it a couple of times a year. But usually cottage cleanup in the fall when I'm bringing all the furniture in and what have you. Cottage cleanup, I might add, when even though my children are there all summer using all the facilities, it's funny in October when the wind is howling and you've got to get a jet ski and a boat out of the water and you've got to carry big heavy chairs in. I'm all on my own and wearing my beautiful jacket.
If you had to choose between that jacket or the old men's league jersey from the Sioux that had a Colorado Rockies theme, it looked like, to really get your son's attention, which one are you choosing?
Oh, I think the jacket's probably more important. I wish I still had but if the sweater of which you speak, our sponsor was called Ojadaki Mountain, and it was a clothing store in Sault Ste. Marie. And the guy that owned it, Bob Courier, he played on our men's team in the Sioux Men's Hockey League. And so he took the Colorado Rocky jersey and just made it and put an O in the middle of it instead of a C. So it was Ojadaki Mountain and that. But there's online, it's easy to find pictures of me. I was the only time of my life where I actually had a beard. And if anything I could save from that, it would have been the beautiful vintage CCM black helmet that was glorious. That and it's a toss up between the Cooper three-piece SK10 the junior teams used to wear, the Toronto Marlies and the Kitchener Rangers. I used to particularly like the old leather version where they had 3 different colors, and that was a glorious helmet. But the CCM was very sleek. That was a good one. So, but the Stanley Cup jacket is a collector's item. So.
I was told that blue and orange jacket was often accompanied by a big CCM helmet and maybe some white skates, I was told. Is that helmet in the picture the same big CCM helmet they were talking about?
No, that was a blue one. But it was a CCM helmet. That one might have been a white one. It was just a different, same model, but a little bit later. The white skates, they were only partially white. If you've ever seen Pavel Bure flying down the ice, he was wearing Micron Mega skates. And that happened to be the brand of skate that I had at the time. And I still have them. And I don't go on the ice much, but when I do, to much ridicule wearing my black and white Micron Megas.
I was picturing the Fedorov white Nikes, I believe. That would look pretty sweet too.
No doubt. We
can draw, as we kind of look at your career path, Bob, almost a direct line from, because you talked about it. You were in Sault Ste. Marie writing for the Sault Star with the same aspirations as the players who were playing for the Greyhounds, right? They want to go to the NHL. You want to be an NHL beat writer. And of course, as everybody knows you today as the original insider, one of the most influential sports broadcasters in the entire country. When you look back, can you draw a straight line? Do you shake your head and wonder how that guy that started as an intern at the Sault Star in '78 ended up where he is in 2021?
Yeah, I don't, it's funny as you do it, I don't think you think that much about it. You're always just kind of like never looking too far ahead or too far back. You're just doing your job and grinding away and working hard. And then, but you're right. I mean, when you get to where I've gotten to, which is semi-retirement, especially when my full-time contract was expiring at the end of last season, you kind of start looking back on the whole thing, and it's you always have that cliche of how time flies. Where did all the time go? One minute I was this Cub reporter with the Sault Star, the next minute here I am, I'm semi-retiring. But I think that's the nature of life that everybody goes through. You kind of look back on it and wonder where all the time went.
Looking back on that time, from coaching your kids growing up to, you mentioned pacing back and forth just a few years ago as your son's team is losing in game 7. Which one's harder for you when you were coaching and watching, and now, Mike's not playing, but he's still a part of the organization and really the architect behind it? Which one's harder for you?
Yeah, it's when you're behind the bench, you actually feel like you've got some degree of control. Although if you saw Mike play hockey, sometimes I didn't have any control, even when I was on the bench coaching him. Sometimes the wires would touch, and then it would be, I would be able to try and calm him down and get him refocused or whatever. But he's very, I don't know if you've noticed or not, but he's fairly competitive. But I think when you're behind the bench, you got more than your own kid to worry about. And so you're doing a job, and you feel like you've got some level of control. Whereas when you're just being a dad and you're in the stands, and I felt this way when Mike played college hockey or even junior A, and I was watching in the stands, you have no control over that. And so sometimes you could see good things happening and you'd be very excited. And sometimes you could see a train wreck approaching and you knew it was coming, and maybe nobody else did, but I did. And I'm like, this isn't going to end well. And sure enough, it didn't. And that's really hard. But it's, with all your kids, you live vicariously through them a little bit, and you just want to see them succeed. And so you're hoping for the best for them. But it's when they're out on the ice or behind the bench, or in the case of being a general manager, you just live and die with every moment.
Real quick, Farzy, I just got to ask you, talk about Mike and being behind the bench, being able to control him. Did you ever threaten to cut him?
Yeah, absolutely. I told
Which
him.
time?
Mike, when Mike was a little kid, he was a really good player, like for his age, and did very, very well. When we got to, I was the head coach of the team in minor Pee Wee, and that was the first year of contact. And Mike hadn't hit puberty, and in fact, I had a team full of kids that hadn't hit puberty, and a pretty good team and a pretty good player. And Mike were really struggling to find their way that first year of contact. And there was such a disparity in size and strength between our team and so many of the teams that we played against, and that Mike had done so well against, that our team had done so well against. Suddenly they couldn't compete. It was difficult. And so the incident you're talking about, or the question you asked about, did I ever threaten to cut him? I told him that, as I said, physically he was fairly weak against a lot of the opposition, and so he's a winger, and he's on the wall and he's getting the puck, and every time he got the puck on the hash marks, the defenseman or another player would pinch down, there'd be a battle, he would lose it, and the puck would stay in the end. And it just got to be so repetitive that he was never getting the puck out. And I can recall driving home with him in the car, and not in anger or anything else. I just said, Mike, I said, I'm going to give you a very valuable lesson here about hockey and coaches and players. And I'm a coach, you're a player, you're a winger. If a winger can only do one thing in hockey, just one thing only, getting the puck out when he gets it on the wall at the hash mark, getting it out of his own end. I said, if he can do that, he's always gonna have the trust of the coach. If he can't do anything else, just let it be, get the puck out of your own end. And I said, if you can't get the puck out of your own end, I can't put you on the ice. And if I can't put you on the ice, then I would have to cut you. And so if you got to find a way to get that puck out, because if you don't, you can't play wing on any team in hockey anywhere ever. And that was that story.
You mentioned Mike's competitiveness, and Chris and I have obviously seen that up close, and you don't get to where Mike is without a competitive streak. But would it be fair, Bob, to say that he comes by that competitiveness honestly?
Yeah, I'm competitive. My wife Cindy, she's competitive. Mike's brother Sean, he's funny because he initially, hockey-wise, sports-wise, early on, wasn't really competitive at all. Sean was the kid who would skate out on the ice and be waving at mom and dad, looking at the lights, and and just out there having a good time. And, you know, when he played, you know, he was motivated not by winning, but he was in a penalty. He was only 8 or 9 years old, and the coach's son was the timekeeper, and Sean got a penalty or whatever. And the guy in the timekeeper's bench said to Sean, if you get out of here and score a goal, I'll buy you a chocolate bar after the game. And sure enough, the door opened, and lo and behold, the puck squirted up the middle of the ice at Iroquois Park, pad 1, and Sean got a breakaway, and he went in and he scored. And he like went right by the timekeeper's bench, banging his stick on the glass. And afterwards, all he could talk about was he got a Twix chocolate bar from the timekeeper, the coach's son. And that's what motivated him. Mike wanted to win all the time. He lived to score goals, and he lived to win hockey games. And if he didn't score goals and he didn't win hockey games, and this was even when he was like 7, 8, 9 years old. I mean, you know, the intensity would come off him in waves. You know, we had to sit him out of a game like in major novice because he was just too intense and was, you know, just not acting the right way. But, you know, he harnessed that over the course of his hockey playing career. But, you know, at times things, as I said, the wires would touch sometimes, and he's about as competitive as it gets. So we all are. But he can go next level competitiveness, which is, I think, for the job that he's got, is probably a good thing. And the other good thing about Mike is he's always had an innate, tremendous hockey sense. And so I think he's been able to, as he's gotten older, especially, been able to balance that competitiveness with understanding the bigger picture of how you go about things.
Would you forgive him? Sorry, Chris, as I just jump in for a quick follow-up, but would you forgive Mike if he left an opposing rink or was passing by an opposing rink where he had trouble winning as a head coach or even a player, and flashed the bird at that rink as he passed by it on the bus or in the car? Or, I mean, I don't know if you just find that forgivable or not, but.
Oh, that would be forgivable.
I think because it was something that you may have done when a certain daily newspaper wouldn't.
Yeah, I know what you were talking about. I was going to get to that. I just wanted to see if you had done your homework. But yeah, when I wanted to be hired by the Toronto Star, the Globe and Mail, or the Toronto Sun to be an NHL hockey writer. And I was working part-time at the Globe. And I worked freelance when I was at Ryerson at the Toronto Star. I hadn't worked at the Sun, but on my way home from the Globe, so I'd work a rewrite shift and I wouldn't finish until midnight or 1. So I would jump in my car, little yellow Volkswagen Bug, and I would leave the Globe and Mail building. And as I was leaving the Globe and Mail building, because they weren't hiring me full time, I turn around and give the finger to the Globe and Mail building. And then I would drive down Spadina onto the Gardner, and I would be going on the Gardner. And if you know your geography in Toronto, you would drive right on the right-hand side. As I was driving east on the Gardner, I'd go by the Toronto Star building and I'd give the finger to the Toronto Star building as I went by. And if you go a little further, the backside of the Toronto Sun, which is on King Street East, and that I'd look out the driver's side and give the finger to the Toronto Sun. That would be my nightly routine because I wasn't making any headway with any of these organizations to get a full-time hockey job.
A lot of exercise in that middle finger. You mentioned Mike's competitive side. Does Sean's competitive side come out now that he's working for, I guess, TSN's opposition in Sportsnet? Is he looking through the phone at the cottage?
Yeah, not exactly, but I never finished the Sean story. Like, he was like that when he was a little kid. I was like flabbergasted as a crazy hockey dad when he announced, you know, our kids always played competitive hockey in the winter, competitive lacrosse in the summer. That's the way you do it in Whitby. And we just loved it. And so Sean, surprise, announced to me when he was like, I don't know, 9 or 10 years old, yeah, I think I'm going to take the summer off from lacrosse. And I said, what do you mean you're going to take the summer off from lacrosse? Yeah, I think I'm just going to relax this summer. And I'm thinking, relax? What do you mean relax? But he did. That one year he took it off. But it's funny, Mike and Sean experienced the opposite thing at the age of 10, 11, 12 years old. And that is, Mike didn't go through puberty early and struggled with hockey for a year or two before he got his bearings again and his game really took off. And Sean was the opposite. Sean was very casual about the whole thing. But Sean, Mike played AAA hockey right from the get-go every year. Sean started out in AA, got cut from AA, went down to single A, and then all of a sudden he went through puberty earlier than a lot of kids, and he ended up going from A to AAA. And suddenly, when he got his confidence a little bit and had a little bit of a physical edge over some of the kids he was playing against, he suddenly became ultra competitive, like almost too competitive. I won't go into the long story of the London tournament, but we came home early because he got kicked out for any number of transgressions on the ice, which I wasn't very happy about. But see, I wasn't very happy when he wanted to take the summer off and relax, and I wasn't very happy when he was too competitive and got booted out of a tournament for going a little over the top. So, dads are never happy. But so Sean became really competitive both in hockey and lacrosse. And when he played Whitby lacrosse, when they played Oakville, there was some kid named John Tavares who was 2 or 3 years younger than Sean, but playing up. And it was Sean's job to try and shut him down. Good luck to that. But he would chase him around and give him what for whenever he could.
You used the term a moment ago, Crazy Hockey Dad, which was the title of one of the books that you wrote, Confessions of a Crazy.
It had a question mark.
It did.
On it.
Well, I think you might have answered the question, but I'll allow you to take a little more latitude here. Do you still feel, not the crazy part, Bob, but like a hockey dad, considering?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Every day. Yeah. And especially, as soon as Mike stopped playing, I thought, okay, well, from that perspective, I guess my hockey dad days are over with Mike. And then he immediately got the assistant coaching job with the Kitchener Rangers, and I was back in business as a crazy hockey dad. So now I had a team to cheer for and a vested interest, and so that was great. And obviously it's escalated to the point now where he's the general manager and the head coach, and obviously now that he's the head coach in this last season, you're even that much more invested again, because now it's like, it's literally all on his shoulders. There's no one. If the general manager and the head coach are having a disagreement, I don't know how they're going to settle that. But I'm fully vested as a hockey dad, and with Sean, it's just a different kind of being a hockey dad now, because I watch every one of his broadcasts, and I'm holding my breath, making sure that there's no missteps in the opening when he does a Leaf game, or if he's doing a Montreal Canadian game on Hockey Night in Canada, and making sure there's no mistakes and he does it flawless. And so you're always a proud parent who's trying to hope for the best for your kids. And every time now they've got a game or a broadcast, whatever the case may be, I'm fully invested.
When Mike made the decision to take over full-time as head coach, and when Sportsnet got the NHL rights, did both sons come to you and ask for some help coming to that decision and dealing with it?
No, I wouldn't say that they, I have constant dialogue with the kids. They probably tell you too much. They probably see dad on the call and they're like, oh, not again. I think we're my wife Cindy, myself, Mike, Sean. I think we're a pretty close family. We talk a lot, and you got to give them both their space. But I think there's put it this way. I'm sure I've offered opinions to Mike when he's like rolling his eyes, and it's like, okay, whatever. But nevertheless, I always feel like it's part of your fatherly advice and thing. But I don't think there's like specific moments where they said, hey, I really need to talk to you about something. But Sean will ask me questions about this or that, and so will Mike sometimes. But and if they don't, then I'll volunteer. So.
The town of Whitby has been mentioned a few times, including the Whitby Wildcats, the team itself. And there's another name that is very strongly connected to the Ontario Hockey League and the town of Whitby. Did you ever coach against David Branch? Did you cross paths with him at all?
No, we lived on the same street. He lived 6 doors up from me in Whitby. And I've known David since I started covering junior hockey in 78, 79. Tubby Schmaltz was still a commissioner running the OHA out of Walkerton back then. But David was on the scene right after that, around 79 or so. And so I've known David a long time. And I didn't coach against David. He always coached older kids, and his boys were older than Mike and Sean. And so, but I'd see him at the rink all the time. And so, yeah, the Whitby connection is strong.
What do you think of the job he's done in the Ontario Hockey League?
I think he's done a great job, and and it's a very challenging job. But I think he brought in an air of professionalism to it. I'm on the Hockey Hall of Fame selection committee with him. I'm first and foremost, I'm now a Kitchener Ranger fan. So if a Kitchener Ranger gets suspended or whatever, I probably disagree with his ruling. So
you mentioned Tubby Schmaltz. I can't help but think, so far, Bob, I've got Two Job Bob, Smoker, Smoky Smoker, Hoser, the Bobfather. How many nicknames?
Bobby Margarita?
Bobby Margarita. How many nicknames do you have? And
I don't know.
Like any of them? Which one's your favorite?
I don't really. Let's see. In high school, the first one I got was Ken's, Kenz. Just McKenzie got shortened to Ken's. Bobby Mack probably was a big one. Smoker started when I was at Ryerson. Long story short, there used to be a lot of boxing on television, and me and my buddies, at Ryerson, we'd go to a guy's. He had a place on Sherburne Street, a condo, an apartment, and they had like a sunken living room, and above it was a dining room area that overlooked it, and it was about the size of a boxing ring. And we used to go over and have cocktails and watch fights on TV. And then one of the guys had some boxing gloves. He used to box in Montreal, and he had 2 pairs of boxing gloves. And so we'd get lubricated a little bit and throw the gloves on and use the dining room, which didn't have a table in it anyways. And it was a boxing ring, and I couldn't fight my way out of a wet paper bag. The guy that I was sparring with was the guy that actually knew how to box, and we were just supposed to have some fun. And he probably took some liberties and gave me a couple of stiff jabs to the face, and I just basically windmilled him and fell on top of him and pounded him. And so they called me Smoking Bob McKenzie because Joe Fraser was big at the time, and Smoking Bob got changed to Smoker after a while. So there was that one. And then Bob and Doug McKenzie, once I started in the business, most of the media guys would call me still call me Hoser to this day. And then after that, I got, all the other stuff, the Bobfather and Bobby Margarita, those have all been created recently, I guess.
Being on TV and in the spotlight, I guess, during that whole Bob and Doug McKenzie thing, walking through some airports, I'm sure there were some interactions with some viewers and listeners that probably didn't go too kindly, I guess.
It got a little tiring after a while.
Yeah.
And, at the time, it wasn't no big deal because it was so prevalent. I mean, it was crazy. And I actually played it up and still do sometimes. But I mean, 10 or 15 years later, some guy would come up to me at an airport and say, hey, Bob, where's your brother Doug? And I'm like, I'd be looking at him like, yeah, hey, dude, like you're like 15, 20 years late with that one. But it's funny. I was just in Florida, and I was at a bike shop, and I was talking to the guy, and he saw my name on the bill or whatever. And he said to me, this was just the other day, and he's like, hey, how's your brother Doug? Do you get a lot of that? And I just laughed and I said, not anymore, but once upon a time, yeah.
Do you feel, Bob?
The other funny story on that is I was at LAX, and I was in the lounge at LAX, and I was getting ready to fly from Los Angeles to Toronto. It probably would have been, I'm going to guess it was around, maybe it might have been the 93 playoffs, Toronto, LA. And I ran into to Dave Thomas, not Wendy's Dave Thomas, but Dave Thomas, SCTV fame. And I saw him and I said, hey, Dave, Bob McKenzie. And I said, I didn't say Bob McKenzie. I said, hey, Dave, thanks for nothing. And he goes, what do you mean? And I go, my actual name is Bob McKenzie. And he goes, yeah, don't blame me. That's Moranis. He was Bob, I was Doug. And I laughed, and that was good.
Can't blame a good guy like Moranis. Come on.
Oh, I know.
Do you feel now, Bob, that you've kind of come full circle, going back to those roots, obviously covering the Ontario Hockey League and the Sioux Greyhounds? You still follow prospects. You've covered the CHL throughout your career, but primarily became that pro guy. But now with your son as the general manager and head coach of one of the premier franchises in the CHL, is it almost like full circle for you?
No doubt about it. And I thought about that when I did the semi-retirement contract. I got year one of a 5-year contract, where my primary responsibility is the World Junior Championships. My secondary responsibility is to do the TSN draft rankings 3 or 4 times a year and cover the NHL draft. And then the other parts of it is, trade deadline day, free agent frenzy day, and I think a handful of Toronto Maple Leaf regional broadcasts. So the vast majority of everything I'm doing now has a strong connection to junior hockey, and I thought that's a fitting way to go full circle, and I'm quite happy to do that. And I've always tried to maintain my roots and keep a close following on what's going on, not just in the OHL, and this is even before Mike got involved. I still tried to be aware of what was going on, and to be aware of the person, some of the greatest people you meet have been through junior hockey. And I listened to your OHL stories with Sanaya, talking about Larry Mavety, and I was laughing and laughing and laughing, thinking about Larry Mavety and Bert Templeton and Brian Kilray and all these cast of characters. And I think back to when I covered the Sioux Greyhounds, and to go into the old Windsor Arena on a Thursday night, there was 4,000 people, and they were losing their minds. It was like the best place to watch junior hockey in Ontario at the time. It was like going into the Boston Garden back in the day, and it was absolutely fantastic. And going into to know all the nuances of all the rinks, to climb the ladder in the old Kingston rink, to climb the ladder in Sudbury, to climb the ladder in Sault Ste. Marie. All these old rinks, you had to climb a straight up ladder to get into the press box. And so, yeah, I remember all that stuff very fondly. And it's all different now because most of the rinks, those old rinks are all gone, but it's still great memories to have.
One time, Bob, after a loss, after the Sioux Greyhounds lost to the Rangers in the Sioux, we found we couldn't get out of the press box because somebody had taken the ladder away. I don't know who.
It's probably Gino Cavallo.
I feel like every OHL Stories podcast we've done, in some way, Mav has come up, or the Windsor Arena.
Yeah.
I feel like everybody has a Windsor Arena story.
Oh,
do you have one, Bob, other than just
pandemonium? It was just fantastic. It was just such an unbelievable atmosphere. And back then, Ernie Godden was the goal leader. My brother-in-law that year, my brother-in-law, he won the Eddie Powers Trophy as the leading scorer in the OHA, and Ernie Godden, and they played minor hockey with each other and against each other, and I think they actually got into a fight. And I probably shouldn't tell this story because I always strive to be impartial, but I think my future brother-in-law was fighting Ernie Godden in the Windsor Arena, and I might have been near the play-by-play guy, and I was going, "Come on, Johnny, hit him." But yeah, so it was pretty funny.
What do you think of the game today, Bob? The on-ice product, professional, junior, whatever the case may be, based on the evolution you've seen over the decades?
I think it's great. I think it's unbelievably fast, unbelievably skilled. Players put an extraordinary amount of time and effort into it. I've said this often, that there's times when I miss the the legitimate animosity, that I there was, from the old days, there's a certain element of just hold on. I was trying to get rid of a call here.
Breaking trades on the OHL Stories.
Exactly. I love that animosity so much so, the old days when teams from players from one team to another team, they would see each other like in the off season and they wouldn't even talk to each other. That part of it all appealed to me a little bit, but the animosity and, that led to fighting and because I've become an enlightened individual and because I had both sons who got concussions in their career, and my son, Sean, had to quit playing competitive sports at 13 because of concussions. And I know the real damage that is done, and the effects that could haunt you for the rest of your life if you don't take care of yourself. I can't in good conscience now look at hockey fights, especially in junior hockey, and feel the same about them as I did back then. And so it's easy for me to reconcile the loss of legitimate animosity, because the alternative is, there's a style of play that I have a tough time reconciling with the health of the players who play it. So simple as that. But I just think the speed and skill of the game is absolutely fantastic, and I'm just blown away by how good all the players are now. And it used to be fourth line players in the NHL or fourth line players in junior hockey. They really were so far removed from the first or second or third line guys. But now there's, on a lot of teams, there's not a big difference.
I feel like, as someone who literally grew up watching you all the time on television, my friends wouldn't be friends with me if I didn't ask this question. Can you take me through a day of your life during either trade frenzy or free agent day? Is it you texting everyone? Is everyone texting you being like, Bob, keep it on the down low, but I got this? What is a day like? Because I get asked all the time, how is he so connected? And my answer is, I don't know.
Yeah, you know what? Whether it's myself or Darren Dreger or Pierre LeBrun, Frank Saravalli, or the guys that do it for the other networks, it's the same thing. I mean, you just grind away. You make a lot of connections over your years in the game, and you get to know a lot of people, and you harass them, and you bother them, and you cajole them, and you twist their arm, and it's gotten harder and harder and harder to do. The game's become more corporate. It's become more business-like. Teams want to break their own news, whereas before they didn't worry about it as much. Even now agents like to break the story, and so some of your best sources are now doing the business, breaking stories themselves. And so you just grind away at it, and you do it at a lot of different levels. And what a lot of people don't realize is the collaboration that's required. So, I might hear something, and I'll tell Darren Dreger, and then he'll make some calls, and then he'll say, well, this is what I got. And then Pierre LeBrun will say, oh, okay, well, I'll make some calls on that. And then Frank Saravalli will get in on it, and we'll all get in on it. And then suddenly somebody else will end up with got it confirmed, just go with it. We don't care who breaks it as long as we get it. And so it's kind of a team effort. And I think that's the thing that probably people don't realize is whether I could be me breaking a trade, but I'm not breaking it if Darren Dreger, Pierre LeBrun, Frank Saravalli, or any number of people who work at our place, Jamie McLennan, Jeff O'Neill, the list goes on, if they don't all contribute to it.
Is it still phone calls, or has it turned now to text?
No, it's mostly
Instagram.
Mostly texting, but on that day, sometimes you, especially close to the deadline, or sometimes you cold call somebody and hope that they're going to pick up. And that the older days, it used to be all telephone calls, so there was no texting and what have you. So, but I'll tell you what, you got to be careful with the texting, because sometimes guys think they're being funny, and they're like, they tell you something and you see a text and you're like, oh, and if you just went with it, and then, and then 30 seconds later, haha, just kidding. And you're like, no, don't kid. That's
no,
not
do
funny.
not do that.
You know, when you talk about that grind, Bob, it reminds me of when Mike was on this podcast and he talked about growing up in the game, obviously with you in the role that you had as a sports journalist, as his father, but he had the chance to go to Stanley Cup finals. He had the chance to go to World Junior tournaments, and knowing how hard you had to work, that grind that exists. How important was it to you, and how difficult was it to maintain that all important balance we talk about between your work and your family life?
Yeah, it was really hard, but you tried. And my way of spending time with the kids was to coach them. And because when you're the coach and you're involved, it gives you an element of control. So when I was the head coach of the Whitby Wildcats for Sean or Mike, the best part of it for me was when I went to the scheduling meeting, I already had my TSN schedule. So, they'd say, what night do you want for your home night? And I'd say Friday night. And somebody'd say, why Friday? And go, because I just looked at my TSN schedule and we have no Friday games all year. So I knew that I could coach every home game. What practice time do you want? I want the 4:00 slot on Tuesday afternoon. Why do you want the 4:00 slot? Because I can coach from 4 till 5 o'clock, and I know that I can still get to TSN by 6 o'clock for Sports Center if I need to. So that was allowing me a degree of control to be more involved with my kids' sports when I otherwise maybe wouldn't or shouldn't have had the time to do it because things were just so crazy, because I had a full-time job at the Toronto Star or the Hockey News, and I had a full-time job at TSN, and I was still coaching my kids in hockey and lacrosse and what have you. So it was great. And I think the kids really enjoyed it too, although it was a double-edged sword, honestly. Because I remember the podcast you did with Mike, the positive was that he got to go to Stanley Cup finals, he got to go to Memorial Cups, he got to go to World Junior Championships, and he loved and he ate all of that up because he is, he eats, slept, and breathed hockey. And he was always that kid when, in 10, 11 years old, he would get dressed earlier than everybody else on his team. And they'd all be fooling around the dressing room. He'd be out watching the game before because he was a student of the game. And even at that age, he absolutely loved it. But it was a double-edged sword too, because when he was young, he was a good player, so he would attract attention for that. He also attracted attention because very young in life, he had to wear glasses, and he played hockey with glasses under his mask, which under his cage, which was very unusual. So he took a beating for that. You know what kids are like, and on top of everything else, everybody knew he was my kid, and I was a well-known figure in the rinks, and I was coaching, and so he would get it pretty bad a lot of the time. So that part of it wasn't easy, because when things weren't going well for him, there was no shortage of people, whether it was parents on the other team, coaches on the other team, kids on the other team, who are given, I bet that's the TSN turning point. So he takes a penalty and he's going and they get scored on or whatever, and he's coming back out on the ice. They're going, that's the TSN turning point, McKenzie, your stupid penalty or whatever. And even got with older, as I can remember his 15-year-old OHL draft year. I was at the Salt Lake City Winter Olympics, because I remember this very clearly, and it was actually my buddies who coached the game. They called me up and they said, you won't believe what happened in our playoff game tonight. They got eliminated in the playoffs that night. It was the end of the season. And they said the referee, the entire game, was verbally abusing Mike, like from the start of the game right to the end. And when things weren't going well, and he was getting more and more frustrated, and your daddy's not here to help you now, and things like that. And so it was really bad. And that, but you know what, it made him, gave him a thicker skin, and realized what hockey's all about, and all's fair in love and war, I guess. And it also gave him, I think, to see the whole side of that hockey at that level, at the elite levels, whether it was the NHL or World Juniors or whatever, that it's not, he didn't see the romanticized version of it. He saw what it was really like, and being around me, and sort of the unvarnished side of what pro hockey, what World Juniors, and the pressure, and how the game can chew people up and spit them out. And so I think he was well aware of all that stuff as he got older, and that probably helped him a little bit in terms of the career that he's in now.
Going the college route for playing hockey was probably a lot easier on him than too, after hearing some of those stories.
Yeah, although the only reason he went to college was because he wasn't ready to play in the OHL. He physically wasn't ready. He was a late bloomer, and
Yeah.
he was able. He was drafted in the 7th round by Saginaw. He couldn't have played in the OHL as a 16-year-old or even a 17-year-old. Maybe as an 18-year-old, but in a depth role if he was lucky. But by the time he got to be 20, he was a real good 20-year-old freshman in the NCAA. And 20 years old, you're an overage player in the OHL. He never would have got to that stage. So for him, it was an easy choice to make. He just wasn't ready to play in the OHL at the time. And, if he had been an elite kid, he would have been in the OHL for sure.
When you're commenting on the game down there for NBC, does your style change at all versus TSN?
No, because I'm just doing. I'm an insider, so I'm basically just. I assume most of the people that are watching know what we're talking about, and quite frankly, in a 3 or 4 minute segment where you're covering 4 items about what the latest news is in the National Hockey League, you don't have time to explain to somebody who somebody is. You've just got to use their last name and assume they know who it is.
Just before we let you go, Bob, there's something I really wanted to get your perspective on, given your time in this game. And it ties into what you were just talking about there with some of the challenges that Mike faced, from referees, from fans. There is the culture side of this game that has reached, I think, a point of reckoning over the last few years. Particularly what we've seen from coaches, and of course the difficulty that players of color or other visible minorities might have in breaking into this game. And I don't know what 3 white guys sitting around who talk about the game can provide, but when I think of Everyday Hockey Heroes Volume 2, which you've also another book you've participated in, and it tells more of those stories of the underdogs, if you will, who aren't the typical kids you'd see in the game. But where do you see the culture at, and are you okay with this reckoning? Is it time maybe hockey took a look at itself?
Oh, I think every day, all of us individually, collectively, you've got to look in the mirror every day and say, how can we all be better? If hockey's going to continue to grow and not shrink, there's only one way to do that. And that's to build a much bigger arena. And that bigger arena means welcoming everybody into it. So the diversity and the inclusion, it's the only way the game will grow, because it's such an expensive game to play, and there's so many almost natural roadblocks to economically and culturally, that if we don't find ways to welcome quote unquote non-traditional groups in, then the game's going to shrink and it's going to die. And so I think I've certainly tried to impart to both my kids, and I think and they're well aware of where we're at with all of that. Mike is finely tuned to that aspect of hockey culture, and what he's doing in Kitchener, I believe, embodies that. And my son Sean is highly aware of that reconciliation that you're talking about, and hockey needing to be a welcoming place for everybody. And that doesn't matter your color or your religion or your gender or whatever the case may be. And one of the things I've been really excited about with that Everyday Hockey Heroes franchise that Simon & Schuster has put together with myself, Sarah St. Pierre, the editor, Jim Lang, is to tell these stories of people that might otherwise, not be considered traditional in the hockey sense. And we've got to get away from that in the hockey culture, and we've got to make sure that it's welcoming, and that people are treated well, and that there's a respect factor there for everybody. So I think my kids certainly know that. I know that, but it's a work in progress. And as you say, it's not for 3 white guys to sit here and pontificate about how far down the road we are or how successful we've been, other than just wake up every day, look in the mirror and say, okay, what can I do today to make this a more welcoming game for everybody, regardless of what color, what sex, whatever the case may be.
Extremely well said. That's a pretty serious topic, and I think one that we try to cover whenever it comes up. But I know we got to let you go, and I want to end off on a little lighter topic if we can. You once said that the great thing about the hockey world is there are a lot of people out there with loose lips. Well, a source told me that your music taste is a little all over the map, from Leonard Skinner to the hip to rap to country. Has it always been that way?
Yeah, I think so. My dad was an Irish tenor, and so I love listening to Andrea Bocelli. John McDermott singing Danny Boy a cappella. But I grew up in the 60s and 70s, and so hard rock, and the 70s was Led Zeppelin. I love to think about these things sometimes. I was going to put this one, everybody does these things on Twitter and social media, like desert island sort of stuff. But I was like, what if you could only listen to 5 artists, musical artists, for the rest of your life? You're only limited to 5. Who would the 5 be? And so, I thought that was a good one, because for me, I started thinking about it and I was like, okay, I'm going to go with the Beatles. I'm going to go with the Rolling Stones. I'm going to go Neil Young. I'm going to go the Tragically Hip. And then for that 5th one, I was like all over the map. I was thinking Frank Sinatra, and I was thinking Led Zeppelin, Andrea Bocelli. And I'm number 5 is still TBD, but I love music, and I love all types of music. I love Canadian music. Absolutely love the Arkells, the Glorious Sons, on and on it goes. So, but the hip is special, and if I've imparted anything to my kids, both of them absolutely love the hip, and have probably been to more hip shows than I've been to, because I was always working when they went to the hip shows that I arranged to get them in. So
the perks of being kids of the Bobfather. Is Pitbull really on your workout playlist, by the way?
Yes, it is. Absolutely. Okay. And I might admit that as much as there's a few Pitbull songs that I really do like when I'm getting on the rowing machine at the cottage in the garage, I particularly play it louder when I know the boys are there.
So worldwide.
And I might even throw on the 1993 Stanley Cup media jacket well.
What's the point of being a father if you can't embarrass your kids?
You got it. You know the routine.
Absolutely.
You know the drill.
A little Pitbull rolling out of TSN Studios July 1st after a full day.
No, that's Leonard Skinner.
Okay.
Leonard Skinner. That was always, I had my signature song after Free Agent Frenzy. I jump in the car, open the sunroof, put the windows down, and as I would be heading up to the cottage to assume Bobby Margarita persona, I would be blaring at full blast. They call me the Breeze.
Absolutely fantastic. Bob, this has been a ton of fun. Thanks so much for joining the podcast and sharing your stories with us.
Awesome. I look forward to going back to listening to you guys call the games, and can't wait for that to happen. It's been a crazy year, and all I would say to you guys and to everybody else and all the OHL fans, but especially Kitchener Ranger fans, just especially the poor kids that they've lost a whole year of hockey. It's crazy. You can't even imagine that happening, but yet here we are. So everybody hang in, and I got to assume that better times are ahead, and somehow we'll all come out the better for it somehow.